Chapter 11. Early in November, bleak weather settled over the city, and the sky was heavy with the threat of early snow. Looking up at the lowering black rock, Miriam shivered. How would Susanna make out in a flimsy wigwam? In a short time the river would be frozen, and the winter snows would seal off the village of St. Francis for months to come. How could she bear the coming winter with no word from Susanna? "Madame wishes to see you in the drawing room," announced one of the maids one noonday, coming into the kitchen where Miriam and Hortense were peeling mushrooms for the evening casserole. Miriam smoothed a quick hand over her hair and apron. Doubtless there was some special service that Madame required. The morning drive was already over, and even so she had lost hope that the extraordinary invitation would ever be repeated. Now she was startled as she entered the drawing room to see that Madame had guests, a rather shabbily dressed lady and a gentleman in a grey coat. "Come in, my dear," Madame greeted her, in so warm and indulgent a tone that Miriam faltered in the doorway. Then the strangers turned toward her. "Susanna!" Miriam cried, forgetting as usual all decorum and flinging herself across the room towards her sister. "Susanna, dear, is it actually you?" It was truly Susanna, in a French silk dress. She was thinner than ever. There were hollows under her cheekbones, but her eyes were brilliant with happiness, for the gentleman in the grey coat was James. "I shall leave you to visit with your sister," Madame announced. "I know how happy you both must be." "What in the world has come over Madame?" Miriam marvelled, and then forgot that contradictory lady in a new astonishment. At Susanna's feet, in a wicker basket, lay an incredible little doll. It was captive, dressed like a French baby, her small face peering incongruously out from a mass of white ruffles and lace. "She does look comical, doesn't she?" Susanna smiled. "I scarcely recognized her myself. When the Indians left us at the French fort, the officers' wives dressed her like a French baby. They gave me this handsome dress to wear, too." "Sylvanus?" Miriam was sorry she had asked, as the shadow fell across Susanna's face. "He did not come back from the hunt. They have taken him to some other village. I could not even find out where." "The little girls are fine, though," Miriam hurried to assure her. "I know. I saw them both this morning. Sue is quite content. I'm sure those good women are spoiling her. But Polly, oh dear, she did nothing but cry. The French lady forbade me to come again. Think of it, Miriam, my own baby. But we must be patient a little longer. James will straighten everything out soon." "It has taken much longer than I expected," James explained. "At first, no one would listen to me. But finally the governor has agreed to allow me 2 months on parole, and I'm starting out for Albany today. Once there, I can go on to Boston to obtain money to redeem all of us. In the meantime, Monsieur de Cresne has agreed to care for you both during my absence, and he will be well recompensed on my return." "I'm afraid they have not allowed nearly enough time for such a journey," Susanna put in anxiously. "The snow has not yet begun," James answered, "and the hard ground should make it easy to travel. I'm quite certain there will be no trouble. I've given my bond that I shall return with the money within 2 months. "Do they trust you to go alone, just on your promise?" "There will be 2 Mohawks sent to keep an eye on me, but the rank of captain carries some weight in this city. In fact, the governor has made them understand that we are prisoners of considerable importance. He has ordered Monsieur de Cresne to treat you as his guests, not as prisoners, and I have guaranteed that his kindness will be amply repaid. I understand you have been living here as a servant, Miriam. That is to be changed from now on." How incredibly it was all to be changed, Miriam soon discovered. Madame de Cresne, obviously chagrined that she had failed to recognize in the English girl a prisoner of importance, now outdid herself to be affable. Under promise of repayment her generosity flowered. Miriam was whisked from the kitchen and from the loft mattress she had shared with Hortense, and installed with Susanna in a guest chamber with a fine canopied bed. Madame's wardrobe and Félicité's were ransacked to provide a collection of hand-me-downs. There was no more cleaning or polishing and cooking. Miriam now sat with the family at the long dining-room table with its white cloth, its crystal goblets and silver candlesticks. She could never manage to be at ease there, however, and her tongue was completely tied between the remote politeness of Monsieur de Cresne at one end and the critical supervision of his wife at the other. Félicité had her way now, and the lessons, which Miriam tried to continue, dwindled to a mere pretense, interrupted by an endless discussion of where they would be going, what they would wear. "Do you think the green damask?" Félicité would ponder. "Or the pink lustring? If I wear the pink, you must wear purple. It becomes you so well." "You mean it sets off your pink costume so perfectly?" Miriam would tease. "Oh, Miriam, you are so droll. Of course, it does go with the pink, but really it makes you look so sweet. Do wear it, Miriam." Miriam would wear the purple dress, which actually made her look sallow, because it was fun to please Félicité, and exciting to be included in the plans regardless of the dress Félicité chose. More than that, It was intoxicating beyond relief to have this charming, light-hearted girl for a real friend at last. Miriam was initiated now into the life that had seemed so mysterious viewed from the kitchen. Mainly it consisted of a succession of formal calls for which half the morning was spent in elaborate preparation. The right gown had to be chosen, the hair curled and dressed, every detail exhaustively considered. Then the carriage would draw up at the door to take them the short distance to one of the tall stone houses where other ladies, having finished the same careful toilette, greeted them. Sometimes the hours were enlivened by gossip and card games. After a little private instruction from Félicité, Miriam took courage to defy her sister Susanna, who frowned on card-playing, and discovered that the games were more satisfying to her lively spirits than the endless conversations. Evenings, however, to which the whole day seemed a prelude, still remained a mystery. Occasionally Miriam and Susanna were invited to dine with the Duchesse at one of the grand mansions on the hill. More often they sat quietly in the guest-chamber while Félicité departed in a flurry of rustling fragrance to dancing parties or sleigh rides on the frozen river. Félicité had so many admirers, they were constantly sending her graceful notes and pretty trinkets, and her invitations were piled up for weeks ahead. Of all these beaux, Miriam knew that Pierre Laroche created the nearest approach to a flutter in Félicité's capricious heart. She had glimpsed, once or twice, his bold, laughing face in the doorway, but always she shrank hastily out of sight lest he should recognize her. Some day, Félicité promised, they must find a young man who would invite Miriam to these evening affairs. She seemed in no great hurry to find him, however, and truthfully, the English colonist from Charlestown was a little terrified at the idea. The weeks sped by. The snow, which had begun in late November, drifted ever deeper in the narrow streets. The frozen stretches of the St. Lawrence became a vast white wasteland. By Christmastide, the white blanket reached as high as the windows. Little Susanna, clinging to Tante Anne's hand, came to call, snug in a trim coat and cap and muff of delicate white fur. January came and went, and February. There were days when it was impossible to leave the house, and Félicité and Miriam whiled away the hours with embroidery and cards. Then a path would be cleared once more in the street, and friends would gather again, all the gayer for the brief separation. Thrilling as all this was to Miriam, it left Susanna untouched. Charming and witty Susanna could be when she chose, and she dutifully roused herself to repay the generosity of these new friends. For the most part she was abstracted, and her eyes were shadowed. It had been hard to part with James again when they had scarcely been reunited, and the journey to New England in winter through Indian territory was hazardous. There was still no word of Sylvanus, the apple of her eye, and her 2 daughters were estranged from her in their French homes. Only Captive, gaining rapidly on good provincial bread and milk, could coax a real warmth into her eyes. She barely lifted an eyebrow the morning that Miriam came rushing into the room, so enraptured she could scarcely speak. "We're going to a ball, Susanna! Think of it! The most important ball of the whole season, and Félicité has coaxed her mother into taking us." "'Tis very kind of them," murmured Susanna, not raising her hand from the page she was writing. "Susanna, listen to me!" demanded Miriam, seizing the pen from her sister's hand. "Stop writing those letters all the time. James will be back before you find anyone to carry them for you. Why can't you enjoy life while we are here?" Susanna studied Miriam's flushed, impatient face. "'Tis very important to you, isn't it?" she asked thoughtfully. "All this dressing up, and the dinners, and the ball." "Why shouldn't it be?" "I can't feel that 'tis real," Susanna warned. "These people have too much idle time on their hands, and they seize anything to divert themselves. We are just a novelty, a sort of outlandish amusement." "That's unfair. I know Félicité likes me. Do you have to be stiff and suspicious? Why, we could have lived our whole lives and never even heard of a ball. When we go back, we'll never, as long as we live, have another chance. Please, Susanna, don't be solemn and spoil it all." "Very well," agreed Susanna, smiling in spite of herself. "We shall go to this wonderful ball. And what do we wear?" "They will give us something. Félicité is having a new gown made. She's been describing it for days." Nothing else was talked about in the blue and white bedroom. Félicité had found the most flattering audience imaginable for her constant prattle. Miriam drank in every detail of the great event to come. She knew what each of their friends would wear, which of the young men would likely pay attention to which girl. "Of course," said Félicité, "lots of the nicest men have already gone on their silly trading. I can't imagine why they should want to go out in the woods when they could have such fun here. But Pierre will be here. He has promised not to leave." "Promised whom?" Félicité herself, Miriam surmised, noting the way the French girl glanced from under her lashes towards the mirror at the mention of his name. Miriam felt a prick of envy. Even more wonderful than looking forward to a ball must be the certainty of knowing that a special young man would be waiting there. Just suppose she could know that Phineas Whitney— But how ridiculous. Phineas was a million miles away, and he probably would not know how to behave at a grand affair like this. She sprang to her feet and shook off the memory. "Show me again how to do the minuet," she begged. "I always forget how to do the turn." Not until 2 days before the ball did Madame Ducleste remember to provide her 2 guests with something to wear. Miriam wondered if she would have remembered then, without Félicité's constant prodding. At last, after a lengthy conference behind Félicité's closed door, she came to the guest chamber with 2 gowns, and laid them graciously across the big bed. Miriam pounced before Madame's back was fairly turned, but Susanna touched the folds reluctantly, her forehead perplexed. "It doesn't seem right," she said. "Such costly gowns as these. James can never bring back enough money to pay for such things." "Don't be silly, Susanna. Madame won't expect to be paid for these. She and Félicité are all through with them. Besides, she doesn't want us to disgrace her." "You should not speak like that about Madame," Susanna rebuked her, not for the first time. "She has been very generous to us both." Miriam refused to be impressed with Madame's generosity. Now that she had had a good look at these dresses, she felt miserably disappointed. She was no longer the naive colonist she had been 3 months before. In their morning calls, she and Félicité had often been spirited away by their young friends for a little unrestrained gossip upstairs. They had spent many a delightful hour going through each other's closets, and taking surreptitious peeks into their elders' wardrobes as well. "These dresses aren't so wonderful as you think," Miriam said now, with her recently gained knowledge. "The material is fine, but they are all out of style. The ladies just aren't wearing sleeves like this, and the new dresses all have pleats in the back." Susanna was amused. "Since when have you been an authority on French dressmaking?" "I use my eyes," Miriam answered, seeing nothing amusing. "As a matter of fact, I could show these French dressmakers a thing or two. They just copy the 1 or 2 styles that come over from Paris. They dress everyone alike, the short, fat women and the tall, thin ones. Look at this now. It would make you look like a pincushion." With a gasp of horror, Susanna saw Miriam's scissors slash ruthlessly through the expensive satin. "Miriam! How dare you! You have ruined it!" "Wait and see," predicted Miriam. "There, we can have it cut here to show the lace petticoat, and have material enough to make gathers in the back." All day long and half the night, Miriam snipped and stitched, tried on and ripped out and stitched again, until the one candle in the room sputtered out and forced her to shut her smarting eyes. "I don't know how you do it," her sister worried. "If I took out one of those seams, I could never get it together again. How could you know this would look so well? The thing is, I care and you really don't," said Miriam. "I wager you'd have worn your old brown homespun." "It would have been more fitting," Susanna agreed, quite unruffled. "This grand lady you've made me into isn't I at all. I doubt James would approve. 'Tis scandalous low." "James would just about burst with pride if he could see you. I know he would. Now stand still. This panel has to be shortened, and then you've got to fit my waist in tighter. I can't reach behind my back." Even Susanna was impressed when Miriam tried on her yellow satin gown. The heavy, shining silk molded her slim waist snugly in front, and fell back to reveal a handsome petticoat made from the salvaged portions of a frayed summer dress. In the back, the material was gathered in 3 stylish Watteau pleats, smoothed flat to the waist and flaring below. Sitting back on her heels, Susanna stared. "I declare, Miriam, you do have a knack. I don't believe there's a lovelier gown in Boston or even in Paris." To Félicité, Miriam had given no inkling of what was going on, but, unable to wait another moment to display her creation, she intercepted Hortense on the way downstairs and drew her into the room, her finger on her lips. She had seen very little of Hortense all these weeks. It was like old times to share a secret with her again. She could not have asked for a more satisfying audience. As she revolved slowly in the new dress, the French girl oh'd and ah'd, her black eyes dancing, her round face wrinkled with pleasure. Hortense, friendly and matter-of-fact, seemed not in the least overawed by Miriam's new status, or even conscious that she herself had been neglected. But once or twice as they talked, Miriam noted a fleeting twinkle in her old friend's eye that brought an instant's discomfort. Could Hortense possibly be laughing at her? She checked herself, all at once aware that she had been prattling exactly like Félicité. Well, was that so amusing? If Hortense had any idea how starved she had been all her life for companionship, she would not begrudge her a little fun now. Indeed, Hortense herself said as much. "I'm so glad you're having a good time, Miriam. You do deserve it after all you have been through." Then, revealing that she was only human after all, a small touch of envy crept into Hortense's voice. "You look so lovely in that dress, Miriam," she said wistfully. "I wish that, just once in my life, just for my wedding, I could have a beautiful dress. But isn't that silly? Where would I ever wear it when the wedding was over? To milk the cows?" and the winter snows would seal off the village of St. Francis for months to come. How could she bear the coming winter with no word from Susanna? "Madame wishes to see you in the drawing-room," announced one of the maids one noonday, coming into the kitchen where Miriam and Hortense were peeling mushrooms for the evening casserole. Miriam smoothed a quick hand over her hair and apron. Doubtless there was some special service that Madame required. The morning drive was already over, and even so she had lost hope that At Susanna's feet, in a wicker basket, lay an incredible little doll. It was captive, dressed like a French baby, her small face peering incongruously out from a mass of white ruffles and lace. "She does look comical, doesn't she?" Susanna smiled. "I scarcely recognized her myself. When the Indians left us at the French fort, the officers' wives dressed her like a French baby. They gave me this handsome dress to wear, too. Sylvanus?" Chapter 11. Early in November, bleak weather settled over the city, and the sky was heavy with the threat of early snow. Looking up at the lowering black rock, Miriam shivered. How would Susanna make out in a flimsy wigwam? In a short time the river would be frozen. "Susanna, dear, is it actually you?" It was truly Susanna, in a French silk dress. She was thinner than ever. There were hollows under her cheekbones, but her eyes were brilliant with happiness, for the gentleman in the grey coat was James. "I shall leave you to visit with your sister," Madame announced. "I know how happy you both must be." "What in the world has come over Madame?" Miriam marvelled, and then forgot that contradictory lady in a new astonishment. Extraordinary invitation would ever be repeated. Now she was startled as she entered the drawing-room to see that Madame had guests, a rather shabbily dressed lady and a gentleman in a grey coat. "Come in, my dear," Madame greeted her, in so warm and indulgent a tone that Miriam faltered in the doorway. Then the strangers turned toward her. "Susanna!" Miriam cried, forgetting as usual all decorum and flinging herself across the room towards her sister,